everybody? Hi, how are you? I'll just be using HDMI today as usual. Where's the point that it crashed? I mean, how quickly can you power this back? Okay, so 455, that's our last message. They'll get 502. That looks like the last thing, because then you're not back up again. Let's look at the software. Oh, okay. So, okay. Well, we want to get the hard break because there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, we're looking for that break in time. For actually, here. Yeah, I mean, next time it happens, you're definitely going to spot the hard updates on going down because I'm really just interested on what happens immediately before it goes down.
You can do that automatically.
Just wait one.
He's jumping out. Log files. I know, we gotta start class off, so look at it. Oh, sure. So how's everybody? Thank you, Theo. Always nice to hear an honest response instead of murmuring. Okay, let me see if I'm up to date here. Good. All right, so today is our last day of Real Juggernaut review. Let's see what else we got on the calendar here. Ooh, we'll introduce the first project today, which will be the only singleton project for the class. Everything else will be done in groups, but this first project will be on your own. We'll look at MDN, JavaScript, and DOM references and hit all that stuff. Wednesday we'll talk about responsive web design, so that'll be slight review, but we'll push harder on it based on things from the Scott Jail book, Responsible Responsive Design. Right, we just keep stacking up the R words in front of that. Read the MDN article this week. We'll read part 2 of Wroblewski's Mobile First. We'll also be getting into my very favorite book of the class, which is Clark's Designing for Touch, which will completely change the way that you think about screens and also change the way that you watch people use their phones on the bus and things like that. And then next week, yeah, we're just going to go hard into touchscreen interfaces. We'll talk a lot about form elements and mood lighting here. What's that? Other side. Everything's mirror image in here from last semester. There we go. All right, so let's talk about the first project if you haven't taken the time to. Oops, I don't have the microphone on. So goes the day. All right. All right, so first project, onboarding. So this will be due probably February, we'll say February 22nd. I wouldn't be surprised if we push this into March, but somewhere around that time. We'll go with February 22nd for now. So for this project, you will create a compelling single-page design that features a sign-up process to get new users to join some type of project, such as an email list, a software beta test, or an open source community. Helpful hint, go find yourself one that sucks so that you've actually got some copy and some things that you're working on and rebuild it yourself, okay? Or maybe you're the kind of entrepreneurial person like Rosa, you've got half a dozen projects of your own that you want to get people on board with, so you can do. Don't just make something up, like wackyemaillist.com or something, all right? Your focus will be on designing for an effortless, engaging entry of personal information and friendly, frictionless client-side tests and alerts for malformed, missing, or incomplete information. All right? So that means solid, predictable form elements, good responsive CSS, and lots of unobtrusive JavaScript that does things like listen for keyboard events and things like that so that we can handle whatever goes into that form. We'll have examples of that in spades the next couple weeks, okay? The goal of this project is to experiment with patterns of interaction that persuade someone to sign up for whatever it is that you're offering, which is not at all an easy task, right? You get an email from me that says, fill out this Google form. You don't really have to be persuaded. I said that you're going to do this, including you, Marco, because you haven't done it yet. Oh, you did yesterday? Okay, I haven't checked it since. Okay. Glad you're on board. But in most cases, people have to be persuaded to sign up for things, and most people don't exactly get super excited entering their email address for the 9 billionth time or wherever it is that you're at on the web. All right? So we'll look at really trying to persuade with interfaces. So your project goals for this are to create a touch-friendly, mobile-first responsive design, to experiment with design and interaction patterns for pleasing user experience. All right? So aesthetics are going to matter more in this class. I don't expect you to make beautiful, stunning, striking, award-winning, but if we can aim for a fairly low bar of pleasing, right? You pick colors that don't give people a headache. You select typefaces that aren't impossible to read because they've got Dracula blood dripping off them or whatever weird 5th grade typeface. No, let's not do that. All right? Pleasing user experience. You'll design and execute a progressively enhanced page focused on system users and tasks, right? We'll start with a baseline of raw HTML forms, and then we will progressively enhance that using JavaScript. You will apply design principles, including typography, color, and material design, which are all topics in coming weeks, if this is giving anybody a stress headache. And you'll engage in agile, iterative web design and development supported by version control. Okay? So, your deliverables and milestones for this project. Are there any questions so far? Description, goals? Probably care more about the deliverables anyway. What do you actually have to do? Okay, so you will do a video presentation of your work in progress, hosted on YouTube, Vimeo, or another similar service and posted to Basecamp. So, if you're like Matt and you weren't here last semester with 361, we do these video presentations. So you're going to have to figure out some mechanism by which you can record your screen and yourself talking about what's on your screen so that you can show everyone your work in progress. Because the other thing is that I think it's the dumbest thing in the world to do a giant project and the only feedback you get from an instructor is at the very end when it's too late to do anything about it. So we do this midpoint draft of your work so that you can actually get feedback from me at a point where I don't have to worry about grading your stuff. We can just talk about making your project better. All right? So you'll do that. You'll post it to Basecamp. Your Basecamp post should include your URL to your GitHub repository. It should also include, in the text of your post, 1 or 2 specific things that you would like feedback or help on. So don't just post, here's my video, here's my repository, duh, right? Some kind of like, hey, I think my typography is my weak source, or do these colors look like hell on your Android device, or whatever. Like some specific things that you can guide people's feedback on. All right? Otherwise, you'll get like, that looks really nice. You did a good job. right? Which is great to hear, but it doesn't help you get any better as a web designer, all right? So that will be due no later than February 8th at 11:59 p.m. Okay. You will then give substantive comments critiquing at least 3 other student projects. This worked amazingly well last semester. Everyone was nice, everyone was supportive, but everyone was also critical, right? So, or I wasn't just saying, like, that's really nice. She was saying, no, you should fix these things and check how this behaves here, right? Substantive feedback. So, and I will engage in that as well. All right? You'll then send an email to me containing the project's 2 final deliverables. That will be due, we'll say for right now, February 22nd at 11:59. That will be a 4 to 5 sentence self-critique memo of your project, or regarding your project and your progress in the class to this point, and the HTTPS link to your project's GitHub repository. You do not have to post this thing to the live and open web. Okay, repo is fine. I will just clone it and fire it up locally. If you want to do GitHub pages and serve it so that people can see it live, that's cool, but you don't have to. Okay? So those are the deliverables. The requirements are that the project must be built with only, listen very carefully, please. Someone is going to go absolutely bananas and hand in some draft project that has like 18 HTML files and 4 different CSS files and half a dozen JavaScript files. No. Single page site. 1 valid, well-formed HTML file, 1 valid CSS file, and 1 JavaScript file. That's it. Okay? 1 of each. All source files in UTF-8s. Character encoding with Unix-style line endings, LF. Organized, readable source that is handwritten and original. So no WYSIWYGs, no code generators, no Bootstrap, or other off-the-shelf HTML or CSS frameworks. Your own original, built-from-scratch effort apart from like the reset style sheet. That's totally acceptable. Okay? Your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files should be indented according to our house style, which is 2 spaces per level of indent. Indent all of your CSS style rules inside the declaring block, and further indent all rules and blocks inside your media queries, which we didn't talk about last Wednesday. We'll do that on this Wednesday when we talk about responsive design. Okay? Then, as if that isn't pedantic enough for you, here are some breakdowns of the specific requirements for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, HTML, only structural semantic uses of HTML elements and attributes. Absolutely no table markup, no break tags, or any other use of HTML to achieve a particular page layout. You are going to be tempted by the dark side when you start putting these form elements onto your page. And you're going to be a good little semantic HTML writer who uses the nice label tag, uses that with a for attribute that points to the ID value of the form element that it labels, and you're going to high-five yourself so hard, and then you're going to be tempted by the dark side because that label is displayed by default inline next to your form input elements. And you're like, oh, crap, I need a break tag so that the label is above the form element. And I will scream and shake my fist at the sky that you have fallen prey to that, right? No break tags. All we want to do in that case is open up our CSS file, add the label selector, and set the display property on that to block. That's it. You can take this piece of CSS to the bank on this project. No break tags. Because again, you might have some kind of a situation where you want the label to appear next to that form element. Okay? So if you drop a break tag in, that label will appear above the form element for the rest of time. There is no getting around that. Okay? So we want to let CSS do CSS's jobs, which is to say what everything is supposed to look like. Okay? No break tags. All right. And if you want to play Stump the Chump with me on Basecamp and try to find the one case where somebody really needs a break tag, I'm always happy to go toe-to-toe with that. I will always win. All right? You will need at least 3 HTML form elements written in conjunction with label tags and the for attribute, like I was just yelling about. And you will have semantically structured text-based HTML content to accompany any media elements, image, audio, or video, right? So if you've got a fun little video to advertise your thing that you're getting people to sign up for, cool. Let's do it semantically. Let's do it valid. Let's do it according to the specification. All right? Your CSS requirements, your CSS file should open with a set of reset styles. Okay? Don't just go in and start hammering and hacking back at all the browser-based styles. You'll waste so much time, and then you'll discover that it doesn't work well in some random browser because it has a different base style. So always open with a set of reset styles, right? Use only relative units, M, rem, viewport. That should be a W. That should be VW, not VM. And percentage in your CSS, no pixel, point, or other absolute units allowed. And you should use at least 2 min-width media queries to enhance your mobile-first styles for larger screens. Okay, that's a pretty bare-bones style sheet, but it should be enough to hit most pages and have them look good. All right, more on that on Wednesday when we go through the responsive design stuff. All right, your JavaScript requirements are that your JavaScript should throw no uncaught errors and is loaded unobtrusively. So no JavaScript event attributes in your HTML. If you catch yourself writing any attribute in the HTML that begins with the letters ON, stop. That's another temptation of the dark side. No onload, no onClick, no on all this stuff in your HTML. We leave the HTML completely neutral. No JavaScript events, no JavaScript attributes, no JavaScript prefixed attribute values and tags, right? We're going to do all the JavaScript unobtrusive. If you have no idea what that means, stay tuned because that's what the rest of today is about. Okay? And you'll attach events to any elements that require interaction. We'll look at how to do that today too. All right? You'll use JavaScript that uses function closures and other techniques to avoid polluting the global window namespace. I'll show demonstrations of that technique today as well. And your JavaScript should use only asynchronous methods and callbacks. I don't think we're going to be working with any live data, so that shouldn't really be a big deal. But if you do hit an open API, you should be doing all that stuff asynchronously. All right? And finally, your Git requirements for the project. You need a Git repository with frequent commits and meaningful commit messages that accurately reflect each set of changes that you make. All right? Nice, fine-grained, granular commits, because your goal for this project is to experiment. If you make these huge 500-line commits or something like that, it gets really hard to branch off or to roll things back or to otherwise play around. So fine-grained, small commits. I'm going to try to demonstrate those things more and more for those of you who are unfamiliar. All right? You must use the command line Git program on your computer. No commits made through the GitHub web interface. This isn't kindergarten. Wow, I was really snarky when I was writing that. But it's not, okay? Command line Git. All right. And finally, a GitHub repository that must contain only the files and commits from this project. For those of you who are new, do not put this in your weekly production problems repository. Start a brand new repository that contains only this project. Okay? And when I go to your repository for the project, it should look something similar to, where is it? Here's the source code for our course website, right? You go here, and do you have to fish around to find the home page for our course website? No. It's right in the root of the repository. You shouldn't make me dig through desktop, the ITM362 files, spring 2017, and keep digging and digging and digging until I find your project, okay? I won't look at it. Your root index.html file should be right in the root of your repository, just like that, all right? I can demonstrate how that's done if anybody's worried about it, but nice, organized repositories, okay? Why? Why, Ore? Why is organization of a repository a really good idea? Yeah, it's good to not have to like dig through your own files in 3 months when you're looking at something. Why else is it a good idea? All right.
Because you want to come off as a professional.
Yes, right? Everyone loves their little LinkedIn page. I'm a self-starter. Look at all the endorsements I've got. Okay, but you know why people hire you? They don't give a shit about what's on your LinkedIn profile. I'm sorry, they don't. Good to have that, but what matters is the work you can do. So if they look at your GitHub repository, which is a much better indicator of what kind of worker you are, and things are a mess, and you've committed your entire My Documents folder to a project for a class, that looks terrible, okay? So you want to show people that you are nice and organized and professional in every file that you name, in every directory that you put in there, in every commit that you make, right? So you don't write the desperation commit like, oh, God, right? This sucks. Hope it works. Change things, right? We want to have a nice story that gets told when we look at a list of commits, right? We can look at the list of commits. This is the little story behind our course website, right? They're not poetry, but guess what I did on the commit that says added link to 118 video? Yeah, I added the link to the 118 video. And if you go and you actually click on my commit message to see the actual commit, you will find, oh, look, it used to be just the date, and here it now is, whoops, back, or front, or forward. Where do we go? I got this zoomed in too tight, right? We look at this thing. Yes, indeed, I added the link to the 118 video. Okay, so we want to have nice, small, granular commits that you can say quickly. I didn't say, added 118 video, changed the policy statement, made all projects worth 10,000 points, blah, 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 like all in one giant massive commit, right? You would hate that. And you should hate that, okay? So we make it nice, simple. So that if I screw up, there are other command line-based Git commands I can do, like git commit revert, right? Whoops, added that link too fast, or added the wrong link, or did something stupid. We can just revert that commit, okay? But you can only do that if you do these nice, small, fine-grained commits. All right, back it up. All right, did I get through the end of it? Yeah. Repository contains only the files and commits from this project. Okay. I know it's a pain in the neck, but it is a good professionalization activity to get organized. Know where your stuff is, know where your commits are, know where your Git repository is. All right? Questions about the first project? Okay. If you think of something, please, you're always welcome to email me, but please consider posting the question on Basecamp. My general principle is that if one student has a question and actually says something about it, there are probably at least 10 other people in the class who have the same exact question but are too frightened to speak up and actually ask it. So if you will be a good citizen of the class and ask the question publicly, then it can get answered for a lot of other people who are too timid to speak up. Okay? If you have a question about your grade, email me about that, right? Your personal business does not have to be up on Basecamp, but if you've got a question about tech or assignments or things like that, always drop those up in Basecamp. Anything else? We good? Okay. So draft of this thing is coming up pretty soon. That's February, what did we say? February 8th. It's a little over 2 weeks away. So get cracking on this thing. All right. So JavaScript. Recall that Mozilla Developer Network has generally outstanding documentation both of the language JavaScript and also something that's very important to us when we are writing JavaScript in the web browser, which is something called the DOM. What is the DOM? Document Object Model, yes. Okay, D-O-M, DOM. And what, Raven, is the purpose of the Document Object Model? I think you know. You're just not venturing a guess right now. Anyone, the document object model, where does it come from and what does it do? Whew, it's going to be that kind of day, huh? Okay. You have your nice little HTML document. and a user somewhere along the line requests that thing into her browser, right? And we're all expecting something to appear there in the browser's viewport. What the browser does is it parses all of these HTML tags. It checks the doc type, and then it loads up the HTML tag, and it loads up the head tag and all the meta tags in there, and it loads up the body tag. And it allows you to do things like write a separate style sheet that calls on a selector like label and gives CSS some instructions and actually apply those instructions to the thing you set, right? CSS is very precise. If you say label display block, labels will be displayed as block, not headings, and not a class called label someplace, right? So what the browser has, this is supposed to, I know it looks like a cloud, it's actually supposed to be a brain. Now it looks kind of like a sad, wrinkly coffee bean. But in the browser's brain is the representation, right? M for model, right? One of the ways that we use the word model is to talk about a representation, right? When you make your own homemade monster movie, you make a model of the city of Chicago and have some guy in a suit walk through that thing and kick the buildings over, right? It's a model, it's a representation. So we have this representation of our HTML document that we can then act on, right? We use the DOM when we're writing CSS. It allows us to do things like write descendant selectors. We can write in our CSS header h1 and then open that, right? That piece of syntax relies on the browser having an understanding that there is a thing called header, and that inside that thing could be something called h1. All right? So most of the time, when we're doing our fancier stuff with JavaScript, we're using that JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, right? This is sometimes called DOM scripting. The term has fallen out of favor, and I find it very sad, right? Everything's React now, and Dojo, and all these like twisted, perverted frameworks that act like everybody on the planet has JavaScript at all times and under all conditions. Whereas we talked about DOM scripting, that begins with the DOM, with the representation of the HTML in the browser's brain, right? That we can then manipulate in a progressively enhanced fashion using JavaScript. Okay? All right, so there's your kindergarten class description of JavaScript. And here's our document object model, right? It's an API. It's a programming interface. All right? It provides a structured representation of the document as a tree. The DOM defines methods that allow access to the tree so that they can change the document structure, style, and content. Okay? Which is what we want to do all the time. You post some status to Facebook or something. There's a little piece of JavaScript that updates the HTML that's being displayed on the page, right? To take your editable, I'm making a post content into something that looks like you actually just posted it. And then, of course, in the background, we're doing some actual transaction so that you did, in fact, post that thing. But oftentimes, we see the illusion that you've accomplished something before it's actually accomplished. All right? And, of course, because the way that we interact with the DOM tends to be fairly common, it's also fairly common to bring in certain libraries, like jQuery, to make this process a little bit simpler. Okay? But I'm getting ahead of myself, I think. Should we talk about like primitives in JavaScript, like numbers and strings, objects, arrays? Rose is saying no. Are we beyond that point?
I want to go over it.
Okay, some people want to go over it, so let's go over it. Okay. So we have only a very limited number of primitives in JavaScript, right? Some languages you get floating point decimals and you get infinite numbers and all these other kinds of things. In JavaScript, you get numbers. Right? A number is a number. If you open up your browser console, let's see, can we get this up? There we go. Go to my favorite URL on the web, about:blank. All right, you can go to about:blank. You get a completely empty window. There's no HTML that's been entered. There's no nothing. All right, and let's see if I go over here. We bump this up. So this is a REPL for JavaScript. It's the JavaScript console. What does REPL stand for? Read, evaluate, print, loop. Right? Say loop that allows us to do things like var age 18. Right? I've just created a variable here in JavaScript called age. I've done so using the var keyword that we want to use for good style. Right? What happens if we just say, I mean, we could do that, right? We can say, I don't know, pets, like number of pets. We could just say pets equals 2. Or we can say var age is equal to 18. We can do var or no var. What's the difference? It has to do with how variables are scoped in JavaScript. If you declare and assign a variable in JavaScript without the var keyword, without that var keyword, the variable immediately becomes part of the global scope, which leads to namespace pollution, which leads to weird bugs happening, right? You think you're interacting with a local variable to a function called pets, when in fact there is some global variable called pets, and because you wrote really sloppy function declarations, what you think you're manipulating locally, you're actually manipulating globally, all right? So we want to use that var keyword always. All right, the linter tool we're using in here enforces that particular rule. You always have to declare var before you drop a variable into your script. Okay, so we get numbers like that. We can do var price, right, which we might set to $24.33. All right, all of these things are numbers, decimal or no. Okay, and we can always use our good old friend type of. We can say type of price. It will return to us number. All right, so we get numbers. We get strings. What are strings? Anything, right? I mean, anything can be a string. All you have to do is say, put it in some quotation marks. Okay, that's a string. So is street address, right? Someone lives at 1126 some street, right? We could store that as a string. Why store it as a string? Why not store it as a number? It's a number. This is true for your whole life. How many of you are taking a database class? I hope they're being judicious about what you store as numbers, as integers, right? If you have a phone number column in a database, what data type does that get? String. Thank you, right? Why string? Even if you're stripping out all the punctuation in a database, there's no, parentheses around the area code or dashes between the exchange. Why would you not store that thing as a number in a database? Yeah, you don't multiply somebody's phone number by 2. You don't compare one phone number to another and decide which one is greater and give them a discount based on that, right? So most of the time unless we're dealing with numbers that we want to do number-like things to, like pets. Pets, make that a number. Because if a pet dies, we've got to subtract a pet. And if they get a new pet, we have to add a pet. So we want to use the number type when we're tracking and doing number-like things with data, not just because it happens to be what we humans think about as a number, okay? Like that. Okay, so we have strings. So anything that goes in quotes can be a string. We can get strings that are both single quoted, right? I don't know, var bar name equals Carl's place, right? I don't really have a bar called that, but if I do, you're totally invited once you're of age. So here I've got a single quote in here, so I've double quoted my string, right? And we could do something like var favorite poem is equal to the road not traveled, right? So there I've got a string that is itself a piece of quoted material there. That we can debate the wisdom of that or not, but because I want literal quotes as part of my string, I've opted here to do single quotes. All right? Your mileage may vary. A lot of times single quotes are better when you're doing DOM scripting, because if you're doing complex things with inserting a bunch of attribute values or stuff, those always take quotation marks. But if you're dealing with a lot of possessives, you might have to go the other way. And of course, what do we do if we want to do? Let's just redeclare bar name again. Actually, we shouldn't use var again once we've used it once. If I want to do Carl's place as single quotes, then I need to escape it with a what? What's this character? Oh! Backslash. Backslash. Wait, am I doing it right in your direction? Backslash. Slash. All right? Saturday Night Fever. Okay? Use a backslash here for that apostrophe S, and of course then we've got to terminate the string with that second quote. Okay? Just like that. Don't freak out that, oh, okay, good, it did return it without our escaping mess in there. Okay? What other primitives do we get in JavaScript? Booleans. How many Booleans are there? Yeah, God help us if there's more than one, right? Because what are the two Booleans?
True, false.
True or false, right? All right, so we can do var is alive, true. Why is that convenient, right? You might be like, we could do is alive as a variable. We could do is dead. Have two variables, but if we say var is alive and set it to false, the thing, the person, the whatever, the plant is dead, right? Notice that we don't put quotes around it. If I say type of is alive, it will tell me it's a Boolean. If I change is alive's assignment to true, now what have I got? Right, so if we go type of is alive now, good. We've got that string type there. Okay, so true, false, no quotes around it. What else do we have? What other primitives do we have in JavaScript? Which one? No, that's way more fine-grained. We got strings. We have a really peculiar little creature that you want to learn about. NaN, which stands for what? Not a number. Okay? So if we have a form element someplace and we ask somebody to enter their age or something and they write, I don't know, none of your business or something, if you try to run that through JavaScript to figure out like when their birthday is or something, you'll get this not a number value. Okay? We rarely assign not a number directly. Okay? It's just, it will return to us from a function where we're expecting a number. We try to do a number thing with it, right? We try to do pig divided by 5, not a number. Okay? You cannot divide pig by 5 unless we're having a hog roast at my place, in which case we will divide it up as many guests as there are. Right? Pig divided by 5, not a number. All right? Now, there's another similar value that we usually don't assign directly, but is also a primitive. Undefined. Right? That is, whoops, I really need a semicolon there. What is undefined? Pretty much anything that you call that you have not defined, or in the case of variables, let's create a variable called who knows. Okay, so I'm declaring this variable called who knows. I'm not assigning it to anything. All right? And if I do type of who knows, its type is undefined. Okay? If we're working with an object, for example, if I do type of window in a browser, it will tell me that window is an object. Right? This is how we do pop-ups and annoy people on porn sites. Right? We use the window object to generate all those extra tabs in window. Not that anybody has ever experienced anything like that. I've heard about it. Okay? type of window. Okay, so we got a window object. But if I call window.sucks, right, I will get undefined. Okay, so any property or any method off of an object that's not defined will get undefined, right? If we do type of window.sucks, undefined. But if I do type of window.location, that's an object, all right? So we can always inspect our elements for those things, all right? Those are our basic core primitives in JavaScript. No question, just a stretch. All right, good. Now, I've been writing all of these variables all over the place, and those of you who know me well as an instructor know that I kind of hate variables. Or more specifically, I hate seeing logic in a program and structures in a program scattered about from within different variables, right? If let me reload this page. Let's get just a fresh start here. Oh, it's okay, let me do that. Come on. About blank. There we go. So let's say I'm profiling users on my site, and I want to have them, it's a site that's pet friendly, right? So we'll have var username, and we'll have var pets, right? Or we could do num pets 3, and we can do var. We got to get all their pet names, right? So how do we do that? Pet name 1. Let's do it the way people actually write it, right? Ralph, and var pet name 2, right? If you start writing numbers after variables, stop, because you have screwed up. This is completely unsustainable. If we keep doing var pet name 2, right? Another pet name George. And you might have a model in your head like, well, people only have a maximum of 2 pets, right? But then you meet a user who has 3 pets, and you go, okay, var pet name 3. Then you meet a person who has 4 pets. Fine, pet name 4. But not only does that get clunky, but there's absolutely nothing here other than that these lines exist in the same file or in memory while somebody is working on this in their browser. There's absolutely nothing to associate username with number of pets. Those are just singletons floating in space. We're relying on the fact that they're in the same program to have any kind of organization. And as Aquila will tell you, that's no way to associate anything, right? So what are the 2 object types that we have in JavaScript that will allow us to associate groups of things with a single value? Say it louder, Matt. Array. And what's the other one? Starts with O, rhymes with jict. Object, very good. Okay. And specifically here, I'm thinking about the object literal. All right, not something that we would have a whole fancy pants prototype and a constructor and all that. I'm talking about object literals, right? So, arrays. Right? Do a variable called colors. And of course, a lot of times when we're dealing with arrays, you almost always want to have a plural as your variable name for an array. That's the whole point of an array, is a group of things, right? Group of things, plural, so our array would be called colors. And then we can create an array literal by saying red, green, and blue. Just like that. Okay? What are each of those things? Red and green and blue. Don't say colors. What are they programmatically? Strings, thank you. Okay? So we made a array here out of strings. And the nice thing is that unlike pet name 1 and pet name 2, or color 1 and color 2 and color 3 and color 27, because colors is an array, if we do type of colors, it will tell us it's an object, but it's actually an array. We can dig harder at it. We can use certain methods like push. So I can say colors push purple. And now it returns the number 4, which is interesting. And if I just ask it for what is the value of colors, it will tell me now it's an array of red and green and blue and purple, which I stuck on the end of the array thanks to our friend push.
Okay? I didn't have to say something funny like figure out, okay, how many values are there in the array, and then add one to those, right? Because how do we access the individual members of an array? What's that syntax? If I want to get green out of here, what do I have to say?
Colors in brackets.
In brackets.
The index.
And the index. And what is the index of green?
It's the position of green.
I heard it too. It's 1, right? Because where's red? Red is at the 0 index. Okay? That's the clickbait you should write this afternoon. 10 amazing facts about arrays. You won't believe number 0. Right? All right, so if we want to pull out green, we go up. Colors 1. Just like that. Okay? So that is our syntax for pulling things out of an array. We need to hit a particular member. All right? Which may or may not be valuable to you because oftentimes we store things in arrays, much like we store things in unordered lists in HTML, right? It doesn't really matter the order of the stuff inside of the array. What matters is the contents of it. And of course, we can do sorting and all kinds of other fancy stuff on arrays. But in terms of storing things in arrays, we don't really worry about their order a whole much when we're storing them. Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah. Does JavaScript take dynamic arrays?
Take what?
Dynamic arrays. Like, can it add whenever it needs to be added? So, like, if someone put in 2 pets and then say they want to add a 3rd pet, the array would automatically add to. It would already automatically add to the array.
That's pretty much what the push method does. I don't know if that's dynamic enough for you.
Okay.
But it does allow us to do that, right? Because okay, so right now we've got, so what it's not doing is we don't have to say, so we've got 4 things in the array. What's the highest index value? 3, right? So we could do colors 4, and we could add black to it, like this, right? Here where we're saying in this specific place in the array, and now if I do colors, there's black on the end, right? And you can get crazy with this. We could do colors 100, and we could set that equal, I don't know, what's everybody's favorite weird color? Puce, right? Colors 100, puce, right? But watch what happens. Okay? We get red, green, blue, purple, black. We get 5 empty slots followed by 91 more. So if you get creative with dropping indexes in, you end up still addressing. Will it give us the whole thing? We could dig around a little bit more. But you basically, even if you're only storing 6 things in an array, if you've got something at slot 100, it's almost like you have 101 things because there'll be a spot in memory that's held to address each member of that empty array. Okay? What are their values? Colors. 65, right? We didn't put anything at 65. Undefined. Right? Again, undefined is one of our primitives, right? There's nothing there. There's still something there. It's undefined. So you have this gigantic array now with some colors in it and a whole bunch of stuff that's undefined. Okay? So that's why we use push. It decides automatically how big the array is and puts the last thing on there for us. Okay? Is that what you're asking?
I guess so.
Okay. All right, so that gets clunky though, right? If we want to do things like associate a username and a pets and their pet names and things like that, we would probably not put all that information into an array. We could, but an array doesn't have a whole lot of internal structure other than to say this is a group of stuff, right? This is a group of colors, or this is a group of pet names. So what do we use instead? We use our nice little object literals. All right, so we can do this. We can say, let's see, how do I get that to go away? Ooh, that's the opposite of what I wanted to do. Close it up, close it up, close it up. All right, screw you. Do a new tab. About blank. Pull up in our JavaScript console. Okay, so I'm going to say another var. I'm going to call this one user. Okay? A lot of times our object literals are going to be singular, right? Because it's an object. So we use a singular. So my var user, and now I can do all kinds of fun things like name and username and pets. Actually, I'll make this true. I only have 2 pets. Okay? And then we can do pet names, right? Which should be a what? An array. Pet names. Hank and Stewie, who's my cockatiel. All right? So I can create this object literal called user. And now the syntax to get at all of these bits of information is super graceful. If I want to find out who's the name of the user, I just say username. And what's the username for this user? It's that. And what's how many pets? 2. And if I want to find out user.petNames, right, that'll return this array of names. So now, instead of having variables scattered all over the place, I've got one little piece of logic that contains all of the information about this concept that I'm modeling here. And maybe this will make Matt happier in terms of like dynamic things, right? If I want to add something to it like user.metalhead equals true, right? Now I've added to my concept modeling this user as to whether or not this person is a metalhead, and in my case it's true. Okay? Ooh, there we go. Okay, so we've got metalhead down here. So that allows us to very quickly, no special push method or anything like that. All you have to do is use that dot syntax, and you can either set or create properties or methods on your objects, just like that. Okay? This is true in all programming languages everywhere. The number one thing that marks newbies, I don't care whether you're writing in Python or you're writing in C or you're writing in whatever, Ruby, those who know what they're doing look for these kinds of structures whenever possible. Because this is what programming, like if we want to get deep and philosophical about it, these are the 2 kinds of ideas that programming was meant to manipulate. Who cares about a random string someplace? Leave that to an English major, right? They could have their poem as a string. We're interested in an object of a poem that tracks its author and its number of lines and its first publication date or whatever it is that we're doing, right? So those things go very nicely either into an object, which in some languages is called a hash, right? In Ruby, we call this kind of object that's just called a hash. Okay? Arrays are usually arrays in most languages, but you might find other things. Sometimes, what is PHP? They call it a named array. Is that right? Any PHP heads in here? I'm too many years out from my PHP experience. Which, speaking of that, we can also use array-style syntax to get properties out of objects, which is very handy because sometimes you'll want to retrieve something out of an object based on the result of a function. Okay? So if I create a function called sayCarl, no, that's not what I want to do. Function, let's do function sayName. All right? And this function will just return name. Right? If I do sayName, it just returns name. But with this particular construct, I can say user, and I can ask it for sayName. I don't know if I need that semicolon there. It's probably going to, yep. We could call for the user sayName. So here, we're accessing a member off of an object by addressing it from the return value of a function, which is pretty awesome. Okay? All right. I'm starting to lose some of you hardcore here. All right, objects, arrays. I kind of talked about functions, but we'll do more of that. Let's take the last 22 minutes that we have left and talk about how we get JavaScript into our HTML and talk a little bit about jQuery and the event model. Boy, today was not the day for me to forget my water bottle. Pardon me just a moment while I hit the old cough drops. Had like this cruddy cold thing for a week. Questions about JavaScript while I'm goofing around up here? Clear so far? Those of you who wanted the review, did this help or did it just make you more worried? Okay. So, when we wanted to load CSS into a page, right, we had this little link tag. When we're going to load JavaScript, what's the tag we use? Script. And where does it go? Rosa says on the bottom. Ari?
Beneath the closing body tag.
So you're saying down here? Before closing HTML?
Yeah.
That's going to throw an error. Okay. A lot of times, if you look at crappy JavaScriptTutorials.com, also known as W3 Schools, they'll tell you to put your script tags up here in the head. Okay. Oops. Which I think somewhere I lost my closing head tag here. All right. We generally want to not do that, especially when we're talking about DOM scripting. We don't want to start loading a JavaScript resource until all the rest of the page has been loaded, because we're doing unobtrusive DOM scripting. Okay, so there are caveats to this. There's a new property called async that we can use to change this behavior, but not all browsers understand it. So most of the time when we're doing hardcore DOM scripting, meaning that our JavaScript is not going to do a thing until all of the page's HTML has loaded and been parsed, we usually want to load our script down at the bottom of the page. And of course, I have a blank file here called site.js in my JS directory, so I'm going to go ahead and refer to that. And to make things more confusing, not only is it not called link, and not only is it not called href, we use source to point to js/site.js. Okay? And because I want to load up jQuery, I'm going to do that care of the Google CDN, Google API, jQuery. Here's our hosted libraries. Angular, there we go, jQuery. All right, so we've got 3 different flavors of jQuery. If you were with me last semester in 361, you might have noticed that most of the time I was using jQuery 2, not jQuery 3. All right. jQuery 2 is a really good idea to still continue to use if you've got to hit older versions of Internet Explorer with some regularity. For the sake of expanding your education, at least for today, I'm going to use the version 3 of jQuery. All right. I also recommend, at least in production, if it's usually a good idea to have a copy of jQuery locally so you can go out into the woods without an internet connection and do web development. But certainly in production, I always recommend using a CDN like the Google API's one, because jQuery is so popular. What, it's like on 80% of the top, however many. I don't have the exact numbers on board, but a lot of sites use jQuery. And a lot of sites load up the Google CDN version of jQuery, which means that before somebody gets to your site, there's a real good chance they may have already downloaded the version of jQuery that you want to use, which speeds up your site because they don't have to go out and make that request. The browser can just read that thing from the cache. Okay? One other little thing that's important is to do this funky syntax here where we drop the HTTPS in front of our AJAX call there. Although I should probably check this. Let's leave it as HTTPS today. Generally, when we're calling external resources like that, we'll just call it with the // When we do that, the request will happen over whatever protocol our page is using. So if we're using HTTPS where our page that loads jQuery is, it will make the request over HTTPS. If we're using plain old HTTP, it will make the request that way. But Google may now not be doing, well, we can test it. They may only be serving this over HTTPS. Let's find out. If I do just a straight up request for this file, but if I hit HTTP, oh, they are respecting that. Okay, so this turns out to not be ancient, arcane knowledge. So what we'll do is we will remove the protocol off of here and just use the double slashes. That means that if we move to an HTTPS environment, which is a good idea, we'll get the HTTPS version. If we're not doing HTTPS, then give us the lower expensive or the less expensive open call like that. All right. So we'll save this. We'll fire up inside the 123 directory. I'll fire up HTTP server. So I can hit this thing at localhost 8080. And of course, there's nothing here to look at because there's no HTML content on my page. There's no JavaScript that I've written with jQuery. But I can do things like type of jQuery. jQuery is a function, okay? Because it's used as a constructor to create a whole bunch of other objects throughout our page. So we know that we've got jQuery running here, which is fantastic. Okay? All right, so let's add some HTML here. Let's just put hello HTML world. And of course, I've got my CSS reset in here, so it's really tiny, but there we go. We can blow this up. Hello HTML world, right? Just in my HTML. I can, from the console, do things like use the jQuery syntax where I do what? I'm referring to this $ creature, which is what? It's jQuery, right? jQuery by default aliases itself to the $. And then down here, I feel like this is extremely dim and very small day. Here I'm passing it a string. Let me do my little zoom effect. Woo! Right? We pass it a string. And what string are we passing? Where have we seen H1 all by its lonesome before? No HTML. We've got brackets around H1. Where have we seen H1 without brackets? CSS. Okay. So one of the things that's really convenient about jQuery is that its selector syntax is based on the same exact syntax in CSS. With almost no exceptions, everything that is a valid CSS selector for CSS can be used in jQuery to pull things out of the DOM, right? So here I can call up a method like HTML. Let me just do this by itself. So I'm going to say h1 HTML. I'll hit return. So when I do that, what comes back to me in my script is the contents of my HTML tag, okay? Which is handy. I can repeat this thing, except this time I'm going to say hello JavaScript world. And when I do that, it changes my document object model so that that new text gets reflected. Okay? It's the same exact call, except this one is what's called a getter method, right? We just want to get the existing value on something. And this second one here, where we're actually passing HTML a string, that's a setter method, where we're saying, run this method and set it to this new value that we're passing along here. Okay? Clear so far? Okay. Now, obviously, coming to someone's house and typing your JavaScript into for your website one line at a time for every user does not scale very well. All right? So what we should do is look at how would we do this programmatically, where we run some JavaScript and do some things. Okay? So let's check out our empty, bare-bones site.js file like this. All right. I would do first my old school this should look familiar to those of you who were in class with me last semester. What is this? What is this thing that I have just typed up here? Half the words to my answer are in a string.
I know what it does, but I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I know that it checks for it waits for the HTML file to load before it runs the JavaScript or the jQuery
Right.
to the page. It's a function, I guess.
Well, let's start from the far left. The $ means what? jQuery. And as we saw with H1, we're passing something to jQuery. What are we passing to jQuery? And what is document? Let's go back out here to our console. I want to drive this home because there's so many mysteries that too many developers never understand. If I do type of document, it's an object, which is 2/3 of the acronym document object model. Okay? So when we're talking about the document object, that's not just some abstraction. There is a literal thing called the document object. And we can find it by asking for type of document, and it will tell us object. Okay? So when we say document object model, that is not an abstraction. That is a literal thing that you can call on your program. So in this older school jQuery event, I'm saying, hey jQuery, here is my document object. And I want you to listen for something. I'm going to use this method from jQuery called on. What is on? Well, let's read the documentation. On. The on method attaches an event handler function for one or more events to the selected elements. Okay? When I say jQuery document, I'm attaching an event to my entire document. And specifically, I'm saying when you are ready, when you have loaded, when that last line of HTML has been parsed, I want you to run this function. Okay? We could do something dopey like this. We could say, alert, DOM is loaded. All right? So now if I go and reload my page here, and of course this isn't going to work. Why isn't it working? On ready function, doop doop, alert DOM is loaded. Well, we were doing so well, let's not have this explode now.
There's no conflict.
Well, I didn't go that fancy yet. On ready function. Oh, no. Come on, Carl. It's Monday.
Carl?
Yes.
On the console it says $ is not defined.
Oh, that's too funny. Why would that be the case? Maybe I didn't save my HTML? I don't see that now. I've got a $ here. Okay, just making sure there's not some pop-up blocker that's denying that. All right. JS, site.js, there's nothing exotic going on there. Huh. Calling on ready. There's a function. It's loading. This is completely bonkers. HTML. What?
You need a slash from your JS.
You know what it is?
JS slash.
No, I think that this old school method is actually deprecated in jQuery 3. Because what I'm trying to do is teach you backwards from what I taught last semester to the new one. Let's see if we just change up to jQuery 2. Let me just grab this piece of the URL. There we go. Okay. So what I was running into is as embarrassing as that was, Rosa. You have no more faith in me as an instructor. Everything I've told you is a lie. Okay. Okay? What's important about that is that jQuery follows pretty well what's known as semantic versioning. Has anyone ever heard of semantic versioning before, sometimes called semver? jQuery 3.1.1, I think, is the most recent version of 3. Right? We can see these numbers on that Google hosted libraries page. Right? Here are all our versions of jQuery. This is all of them. We've got 3.0 to 3.10 to 3.11. Right? What happened to 3.09? There was none. Right? Likewise, we can look at the 2 series. We go from 2.14 to 2.20. Right? So we're not just counting things. This is what's known as semantic versioning. And there's actually an entire site that's dedicated to semantic versioning so that you, in your projects, can use semantic versioning. And semantic versioning itself, conveniently enough, is semantically versioned. Okay? So this is semantic versioning 2.0.0. Right? So here is the summary. Given a version number of major.minor.patch, increment the major version when you make incompatible API changes. That's what you just saw with me getting frustrated at my jQuery that didn't work. Right? The API in jQuery changed from 2.x to 3.x. Okay? Then we do a minor version bump when you add functionality in a backwards compatible manner. Okay? So usually those point releases, 2.1, 2.2, you're getting more stuff, but 2.2, if it's done correctly according to semantic versioning, should not break how you use the library at 2.1. Whereas 3.0 will be different from 2. Whatever. Okay? And then finally, we have a patch version when we make backwards compatible bug fixes. So if you see a version, hey, new version out today, 3.0.2, what happened in that release? Did you get new features? No. It was only a bug fix release. That's the only time that you bump the patch version is when you have backwards compatible bug fixes. If we see 2.1 point something come out, we can get, yay, new features coming because that second number, the minor version, got bumped up. All right? Did anybody know this before? That like, okay, good. So a few of you knew this. Now everyone in here knows this. Okay? Start this now in every inconsequential project that you write. Right? Start writing project 1 as version 1.0.0. And start tagging out your Git repository. We'll talk about that next time, how to do tags in Git repositories, so that you can then jump from the major to the minor version. Are you doing something that's incompatible with previous work? Then we bump the major version. Are you adding things that weren't there before? Bump the minor version. If you're fixing stuff that somebody pointed out on Basecamp, do a patch release because you're just fixing some bug that was there. And again, good commits will help reward this behavior for you. Okay, I still have 3 minutes, so I'm going to use them, by God. So, this was the old school method of doing the ready event. Now, jQuery has made it much simpler. All we have to do is actually pass the jQuery. Let me double check this. This is funky. jQuery ready event. Okay. All right, so here are all these equivalent syntaxes, and then we see here, as of jQuery 3.0, only the first syntax is recommended. Other syntaxes still work but are deprecated. So the first syntax, all we do is we have $, and then we have our handler, which is, in this case, is just a function that we want to run when the page is ready. So all that other stuff goes away, and now all I have to do is I can just say, and let me put my alert back, because now I know it'll fire. DOM loaded. Just like that, and let me go back here. See, this is why I should have been committing all day long, instead of using undo like some kind of monster. Okay, so here, reload this page. Boom, now I've got my DOM loaded. Okay, so the syntax got much leaner. Now, someone asked about the $, and no conflict. So part of the problem with globally scoped variables is if I do type of $, it will tell me it's a function. What I would like to have happen is to run type of $, and get undefined because I don't want to occupy the global namespace in any of my scripts with anybody else's shortcut, because $ is a very, very popular shortcut. It's a valid JavaScript variable. That's all there is that's special about it. Okay? You'll see other symbols used like underscore, the namesake of what? Underscore.js, right? They use the underscore. So what I want to do is release the $ by calling no conflict from jQuery. And now I will make this just a little bit fancier panted. I will call the jQuery object, but then I will pass to it $, and now I can do, let me drop in $, H1, HTML. There we go. So now when I run this thing again, I won't get my annoying pop-up. I will see the DOM has been loaded. If I do type of $, undefined. If I do type of jQuery, that's still a function, which is what we would expect. And now, but I'm still able to use the $ within my own function, right? What I've done here is I've pulled $ out of the global space. I've called upon jQuery in the longhand form, and it's smart enough to pass an instance of itself as a $ variable into my function, where I can party like there's still a global $. All right? All right, I'll see you Wednesday. Thank you so much.